Sounds good. Okay.
All right, it's great to welcome Serena Eades to the show. I hope I pronounced your last name correctly.
Yep.
She's a musician and she's a founder of the Serena Eades Academy of Music.
Yeah.
Serena, welcome to the show. How are you?
Good. I'm well, thank you. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, thanks so much for coming on. I got to know you via Annika Wilson and Danielle Leonard, who are instructors of the academy. How did you come to know them?
Well, Danielle, I came to know through another organization called the North Celtic Ensemble. So she and I both co-direct or assistant direct ensembles that are parts of this larger organization of youth that play fiddle music in Vancouver. And so she was taking on the younger groups, and I was working with some of the older groups alongside another director named Gabrielle Debroy. And I was looking for another person to take on some private students through my school. And she just had such a great rapport with the youth that she was working with. And she's a great musician and also a great pedagogue. So that's how I brought Danielle onto the team. And Annika is a close friend of Danielle's. And so when Danielle was starting to get filled up with students, I asked Annika if she would be able to take on some teaching as well. So that's how I met them, was through another teaching organization.
I see. Oh, that's wonderful. Yeah, they're wonderful musicians, and they both have experiences teaching children, of course.
Hmm. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Why did you found the academy?
Well, I've been teaching private violin lessons since I was 15, which was probably too young to start teaching, but my teacher back then passed on some of her waiting list students to me, and so she mentored me through learning how to teach back then. Then, I went to university a couple of times, and was doing more performing, touring, recording, composing, and knew that I've always known there's a demand for teaching. There will always be, a demand for or for music teachers, music education. But I didn't want to or didn't have the capacity to fill the demand myself. And so I had a couple of advanced students at the time who had expressed interest in doing some teaching of their own. So I gave them the option of either, I give you my waiting list of students and I can help you learn how to teach, or I hire you and we see how this goes. And so I hired them on, which meant that I dealt with all the scheduling and invoicing and parent communications. So it was initially two of my own advanced students that I hired, and then a new woman had moved to where I was sort of centered on the Sunshine Coast at the time, which is off the west coast of BC. So you take a ferry from Vancouver up to the peninsula of the Sunshine Coast. And another woman had just moved there around the same time, and she was new to the community, and I was connected through a mutual friend to see if we'd be interested in working together. And so, with my connections from growing up there, I was confident that I could get her a lot of students. And so, she's still with us now, and that was 5 years ago. And then it just sort of bloomed from there. I discovered there was a demand in Powell River, which is a community beyond the lower Sunshine Coast. And there was some people willing to teach, but didn't have the time to take on the administration aspect. So I expanded there and then expanded into Vancouver when I moved here and North Vancouver as well.
That's wonderful. Yeah. How long ago was the academy founded again?
Officially in 2019,
hmm Yeah. So,
in the months before COVID.
uh-huh. Yeah. So you're celebrating the fifth year anniversary this year.
Yeah, I guess we are. Ah, I didn't even realize that, but yes, it just sort of all melded together. But yeah, we're in our 5th year.
I see. I certainly hope that you did something special to commemorate the occasion.
I will now. Yeah, yeah, I guess it would have been September would be the start of our 5th year this past September. So I will do something. That's a good
Okay.
point.
Yeah. Well, when you do something, of course, Annika and Danielle can obviously be participants.
Absolutely. Yeah, I would love to get all the teachers together. We have six teachers at the moment, quite spread out. So we haven't actually, none of the teachers have actually all met each other because it's just too far away. We've met each other on Zoom and we have meetings there, but so maybe we'll have to have a Zoom evening
I see.
celebrate.
So are classes mostly organized online or in person?
Now, predominantly in person, but we do have quite a few students that are taking lessons online. Part of the reason being, well, for one, they work really, really well. I'm an advocate for online lessons, in particular when you have a good rapport with your teacher, but your teacher, you know, you want to study with somebody that isn't where you are located. And also for remote communities, online lessons are great because you can get connected to a whole community of teachers and students while still living in a small town like Cathet, which is the Indigenous name for Pal River. So, point being that we have quite a number of students that live in Pal River but take online lessons with another one of our teachers because the teacher in Pal River is full. But other than that, we have a few students that are outside of our geographic studio locations. We have some that are in the interior of BC. For a while, we had a student in Alberta and Ontario and Chicago. Um, but yeah, largely in person. I would say probably 80% in person.
I see. So
Mhm.
mm, I'm assuming that during the pandemic, everything has to be located online.
Yeah. So it was sort of a silver lining was that the pandemic really hit here right at the beginning of our spring break. So we had 2 weeks of planned holidays to figure out what we were going to do. And we all jumped on board with the online thing. I actually, in that period of time, hired another teacher in Nova Scotia and a colleague and friend of mine in New York. And so we actually, over that year, I would say doubled, almost tripled our studio because we were able to, we had more capacity to take on students. And we didn't have the added travel time need for finding studio space to rent, and yeah, so it took a little bit to get going and learning best practices for teaching online. But we worked together, all our teachers and myself, we worked together really well on sort of strategizing. Yeah, but it was a challenge, and we hope we don't have to go back there again, but we learned a lot. And I would say overall it was a successful year, considering it was our first year.
Mhm. I suppose it is a bit of luck that, the academy was founded before the pandemic really hits.
Yeah, I guess it was. Yeah, it was very, that's just sort of how it happened with the September's our start of the school year. So I'd hired these new teachers in September. So we had a few months to kind of get things rolling. I mentored the younger ones and yeah, it was good that we started before. We had a bit of a lead up, and then we'd already gained like some students that and some loyalty between ourselves and our families, like student families. So we did our best to just support them as we best as we could, and so I think that's what kept them going through. And we had the blessing of a grant from Creative BC through the Amplify BC program, which was a huge support to provide some funding for some resources to move online, communicate, and in fact grow our marketing through that period in the remote communities. So yeah, Creative BC's been a huge support.
That's it. Yeah, that's one. So, what was the timeline of the lockdown in British Columbia compared to the other Canadian provinces?
Oh, that is a good question. I guess I don't actually know. It would depend on the degrees of the lockdown because there was periods of time where we weren't supposed to be going out at all. and then periods of time where the bubbles were sort of able to increase and then decrease again. So compare province by province, I don't actually know.
That's it.
Yeah, I sorry.
Yeah. I was in Ontario for the years 2020 and 2021. Because I was going through university at that time. And yeah, I remember there were like curfews even, like we're not supposed to go out after a certain period of time, I suppose. Or yeah,
Hmm.
we weren't supposed to go out unless it's for grocery shopping or something like that. So
Yeah,
almost
we didn't have time curfews that I recall. It was more just don't go out for long,
yeah.
if you need to walk the dog or absolutely have to go get groceries. But I don't think we had time curfews.
Yeah. Um yeah, I don't recall any time curfews either. Yeah, my mistake. But but there are times when, once the curve, so to speak, was flattened, then, they let us move freely for a certain period of time, and then, it's total
Mm.
lockdown again. And I believe in 2021, after the vaccines were rolled out, then there is a little bit of loosening in the movement. Like you can go to like restaurants and movie theaters, but you still have to wear those masks.
That's right. Yeah, it's all coming back to me. We had moved lessons online exclusively for quite a period of time, and then we took the summer off because we generally students around here go on holiday, go count. Well, I guess they weren't really going on holiday, but we took the summer off of private lessons and did a what I called a summit, a string summit. So kind of like a fiddle camp online. And then we sort of had that chance to like, okay, figure out what we're going to do in September, which was when I think we were allowed to have, this was September 2020, do a little bit of in-person things but distant. So we had, had the time to figure out all the signage, the protocols of entries and exits, which rooms in our studios we were going to use and which rooms we weren't going to use, because some of our studios have only small spaces, because we function out of at that point predominantly um, shared leases or renting from other studio owners. So yeah, we work things out a little differently each few months.
So, I wonder, when was it? Did you move to Vancouver before or after the founding of the academy?
Actually, now come to think of it, I actually moved to Vancouver in 2015,
Oh, okay.
14. But I grew up on the Sunshine Coast, and so I was commuting quite a lot to the Sunshine Coast. And so most of my students were there. I was touring with a band out of Vancouver, and I wasn't really teaching in Vancouver at that period, that until like 2019 was when I started increasing my own Vancouver studio. So yeah, I had a bit of this crazy commute to the Sunshine Coast, but have lived in Vancouver for 10 years now. Hmm.
So, how do you find living in the big city?
I lived in Boston before that, so
Oh,
Vancouver was, I did 2 years in Boston. So Vancouver is smaller, a little bit smaller, maybe about the same size. I quite like being in the city. Aside from it being extremely expensive and difficult to make a living that pays your rent, uh, I quite like the vibrancy of any city, and Vancouver has lots of great things going on, and it's a good was a good hub for me to tour out of with the band that I was working with then, and I still play with them a little bit, and so I quite like it. It's a beautiful city. Yeah, and it's close to the mountains and the ocean, and so that inspires a lot of great music to come out of here.
yeah. I have distant relatives living in the Vancouver area, but they live like an hour away from the city because yeah, you cannot afford it if you're
So
living
yeah,
in the city center.
yeah, it's pretty expensive.
Yeah, but I'm sure the weather is much better than Boston.
Yeah, yeah, we don't get as much snow, and it gets pretty gray. Oh, my apologies. Gray and snowy in Boston, but I liked it then. But yes, it's much milder here. We can be outside all through the year, just despite or in spite of the rain.
Yeah. So you mentioned the band that you're doing music with. Would that be the From Delhi to Dublin band?
Delhi to Dublin is the band. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a very interesting combination. So tell me more about it.
I joined that band after they had existed for 12 year, 8 years, something like that. And the inception of the band, if I remember correctly, was through a festival called Celtic Fest in Vancouver. It might have had a different name at the time. So this goes back to 2006, I believe. And there was, yeah, so it was a Celtic festival, but there was a man, one of the men in the band, his name's Tarun. He was asked to put, he's a producer, DJ, electronic musician, and tabla player, and he was asked to put together a project for an evening at Celtic Fest. And I think it was called Delhi to Dublin. That was kind of where the initial name came from. So he brought in a couple fiddlers, some electronic music, a singer, and a dole player, friend and colleague of his, and they did a night. And it was supposed to sort of be one collaborative night, but then it just sort of snowballed into an actual band that toured the world and put out a number of albums. And so we still exist today. We sort of tapered off quite a lot over the COVID years. We just aren't touring as much as everyone's got families and has sort of moved out of the Vancouver area, except for myself. So yeah, it's a pretty exciting project that initially started with I guess you call it a fusion between like Indian influences and Celtic influences, and then moved a little bit more mainstream and into the bass electronic world. Um, yeah, now is going through another sort of redefining period is again.
I see. So I'm guessing you're more familiar with the Celtic sound than the Indian sound.
That was sort of my contribution, I would say. But even, it's initially it was a lot of fiddle tunes, like Irish, Scottish tunes that were sort of inserted into the, excuse me, into the songs. But then later on sort of morphed into more just violin parts, I guess. So string lines and textures and pseudo classical lines, I guess, in some way, or mirroring other instruments, mirroring synthesizer lines or guitar lines. But yes, there's still a heavy Celtic influence in there. And I've learned a lot about Indian music and through those 10 years touring with those folks. And yeah, I love it. It's been a great journey.
So where did you guys go to during your tour?
Oh, we toured a lot in North America, in the States and in Canada. We also we traveled in India three times. So we did three tours in India. We went to Malaysia and England. We played at Glastonbury while we were in England. And the band toured many other places in the world before I was with them. They played in Australia and I think more in the UK. We've never toured in South America. But yeah, a lot of North America and India, a bit of the UK.
Yes, yeah. Do you miss the life on the road?
No.
Hmm.
I miss um the excitement and adrenaline that a good show brings. There's a lot of other things that go along with touring that are very not glamorous. The packing and the early morning flights or red eye flights and little sleep. And so the traveling, with age becomes pretty arduous. But I would do short amounts of touring now. Just wouldn't go on the road for a long time anymore.
That's it.
And the shows, when the shows are really good, that kind of carries you through. So yeah, it was a great adventure, and I hope we get to do some more highlight shows. That'd be great.
So, mm, so do you have hopes of returning to the band to record some more music then?
We are planning on doing some more recording. It's a slow process just because everyone's sort of living in different parts of the province now and has other work and families. But yeah, we will be doing some writing and recording in the coming year for sure. And I look forward to seeing what comes out because after having so many years off of not playing and recording with each other, I'm sure we'll have different things to contribute now.
Yeah, so do I. Have you have you recorded or planned to record music under your own name?
I have not recorded any serious music under my own name. No. I have composed a fair amount of music and performed some solo shows, but I have never recorded them. No. I quite enjoy being a side person, um, and sharing in a collaborative process, and creating together with other people. So I haven't, no.
So is that something that you plan in the near future, maybe?
Um, Probably not.
Hmm.
I really genuinely like working with other people and bouncing ideas off of somebody else and not necessarily being the exclusive one in charge. Um, I like a shared process and I like somebody, if a person puts out an idea and you can respond to it or vice versa, I feel like you can build something, I can at least, something that's a lot bigger than myself. So I hope to work with, I am actually working with some other artists in the coming weeks, which really I get a lot of joy out of doing that, collaborating and so no, I probably won't be doing anything solo. Maybe if there's another lockdown and I decide to spend some time creating on my own.
I see. Yeah. Well, for my part, I'm not sure what I'll do if there's another lockdown. So,
We won't go there.
yeah. Do you remember your own musical teachers?
Absolutely. Oh yeah, have had a huge impact on my life. And each and every one of them brought something to me as a person and as a musician and as a violinist, that's different and unique, which is part of the reason I think it's important to not always stick with the same teacher forever. I've had some that I feel are lifelong mentors, but like I say, I got something different from them. I can go through who they were, or depends how much detail you'd like.
Yeah. As much as you are able to give, I suppose.
I mean, I started at 3.5. So my first teacher was a Suzuki teacher on the Sunshine Coast named Katie Angermeyer, and she taught my dad and myself together. So the Suzuki method is founded in the Suzuki Triangle, which is the parent, the teacher, and the student. And so my dad and I took lessons together for at least the first year. And as a parent and a busy, adult, he wasn't able to continue taking violin lessons with 4-year-old me. So I kept going, and a number of years later, switched to another teacher. This is all on the Sunshine Coast, named Michelle Bruce, and she was the one that gave me my first students when I was 15. So Michelle took me through, I think, my first Royal Conservatory of Music exam and a number of music festivals. We had these sort of, it's a competition. It's called a music festival in the classical music world. And so she gave me my first students, mentored me through, how to teach, how to essentially run a business as well. My mom also helped me in how to communicate with adults as a 15-year-old being paid by adults to teach their kids. So Michelle still teaches on the Sunshine Coast, and she's sort of the fairy godmother of fiddle music there. She's just brought up so many young musicians, and yeah, she's been an incredible mentor as well as Katie. And then I moved on to my last teacher who I had in high school, Kathleen Hovey, and she brought me through another Royal Conservatory exam and brought me further into the classical music world. And I had a really close relationship with both her and her husband. I'd go to her home for lessons and have tea. And back then, it was quite common for lessons to happen in the teacher's house. It still does now. And after Kathleen, I graduated high school and studied with Nancy DeNovo in North Vancouver. And Nancy really built up my playing to where it is now. I still refer to many of her teaching philosophies and techniques when I'm doing my own teaching and my own practicing. So I've gone back to her for lessons over the years as well, and I would still do so in a heartbeat. She's incredible pedagogue and mentor. And then I moved on to years later, I went to Berklee College of Music in Boston and studied with a lot of incredible teachers there. So yeah, the teacher plays an incredibly important role in the development of both a child and a adult and a musician.
Yeah. So yeah, you've alluded to this earlier, but how have your teachers helped you to be a better teacher?
Everything from specific pedagogical concepts and exposure to methodologies like the Suzuki method and the Royal Conservatory of Music, which is a Canadian examination board for classical instruments. So everything from sort of tangible like tools to repertoire and supplemental material, books and recordings and teaching resources, to life skills, really. Like, I think music lessons have a lot in common with athletics in that it has to become a daily practice. And that's something that, when in addition to going to just regular school, you then have to go home and practice your instrument, uh, ideally every single day. And so the teachers instill sort of mm, discipline, really, and resilience because you have a lesson coming up 6 days from today, no matter what day it is. And so wanting to be prepared for that lesson, for that teacher to show them that you did the work is a huge incentive. And also just awareness. I think all my teachers instilled um, valuable life lessons of kind of critical thinking and being aware of your surroundings and aware of everything from musical things like sound to, um, you know, physiological things like how your body works and how it can work in space. I was also a dancer, so there was they both kind of music and dance complemented each other because I learned how to use my body in ways to hopefully not injure it while doing something extremely repetitive. And also you learn compassion, both being a student and a teacher. You learn that everybody learns differently, and as a teacher you have to learn how this person in front of you learns best, because you can't just teach how you want to teach, how you think that other people should learn. You have to kind of get inside the mind and the life of that student to go, how can I best support them? So I feel all my teachers did a great job of doing that, the supporting the building up of a human being from a young age.
Yeah. You said you started playing the fiddle when you were three and a half. So yeah, how do you keep persevering, even with all that difficulty in the schedule and all that?
Uh, all credit is to my parents. They were every year they'll tell you that I wanted to quit because especially for the first 8 years or more, it doesn't sound great. It's not particularly fun all the time. It's very difficult physically. It's not a comfortable, you're putting this thing on your collarbone, it hurts your neck, it's squishing your thin, and you got to learn that, like, build up these back and arm muscles as a 4-year-old that you wouldn't be doing otherwise. But my parents would say every time that I was like, I want to quit, I don't want to go to violin, their message was, we've committed for the year. We're committed for the school year. So the school year was very important calendar. My calendar to this day doesn't function January to December. It's September to June. So you're committed until June. End of story. We're not talking about it. And so I would, barrel ahead and go to the lessons and not always practice as much as I should. Not always do just because I didn't want to, but because I took on lots of other extracurricular activities and jobs and orchestra rehearsals and my own teaching. But yeah, come June, I would have the summer off, for better or worse. And then come September, they would say, okay, well, do you want to go back to do violin? And they would encourage me to do so, say, you've worked so hard to get this far. And I didn't want to be a quitter. So I would just sort of say, I'd forget the days, I'd forget the bad days, and I would continue and do another year and another year, another year. And one teacher shared with me a great article that is, that I believe the title of the article is Never Quit on a Bad Day. And so my parents really fostered that, was, if you quit on a bad day, then you're not really allowing yourself the opportunity to get through to the other side. And almost always there is another side. And so now I'm a professional musician and I love what I do. And it wouldn't have been that way if my parents hadn't pushed through those really rough years.
That's incredible. I remember when I was, I think, 5 or 6, and my parents had the idea of introducing me to the piano, but it didn't last too long because I think they themselves were very busy and I was barely motivated. So it never got anywhere. I think I quit when I was 8.
Hmm. I mean, like, all my hats off to parents who are, both, usually both working and preparing meals and travel, getting kids here and there, and then trying to squeeze in a practice at home on an instrument. Um, yeah, there's lots of skill tactics around that you can kind of foster an environment where eventually the child will take ownership of the instrument or of the practice, but it takes a long time to get there. Takes
Mhm.
years of, putting it in your routine so that it becomes as much a part of your day as brushing your teeth.
Yeah. I think it would help too if like your parents are musicians themselves, which neither of mine are. So were yours musicians? Oh,
Amateur musicians. My mom grew up playing piano, and my dad's played a number of instruments over the years. And like I said, played violin with me for about a year, maybe two. But no, they had music in their background. My mom's grandfather was a composer, and my dad's uncle was a cellist. Um, but they themselves, you know, were amateur musicians, but they just really believed that having something physical, like physical movement of some sort, be it athletics or dance, and something artistic like music, had to be a part of our extracurricular activities.
wow.
Yeah.
To what extent have you developed your ear to, pick up different tunes and such?
Um, I would say that's one of my strengths is I can pick up a melody very easily. Um, uh, Especially if it's on a stringed instrument, but I can pick it up on any instrument. Largely probably accredited to the Suzuki method. I grew up with the Suzuki method, which devotes a lot of energy to ear learning. So you listen to the pieces of music. You're looking at the sheet music, but you're also listening to the recordings. and my parents would put the recordings on an old answering machine tape. So I don't know how it worked exactly, but it would repeat the same song. And I would go to sleep listening to whatever song it was I was supposed to be practicing. And as much as it drove me nuts going to sleep, say listening to Twinkle Twinkle Little Star 50 times, it makes a huge difference to your ability to then take that what you've heard, this repeated melody, and then make it come out here. And singing helps. I'm not a singer, but I can sing the melodies, and being able to hear them in your head and sing them and then make them come out on an instrument makes a big difference rather than just hearing them here and trying to connect it here. It has to pass through some part of your brain in an active way. And then learning fiddle music, because folk music is it's an oral tradition. So even when it's written down, there's a lot of nuances that you can't write down. You have to really, really listen closely. Like, how do they make this ornament sound that way? Not even just what is this ornament, but how do they make it sound so cool? So I did a lot of listening to recordings of musicians that I loved, and then I would transcribe them. So that was another layer to learning by ear, was learning how to write out what I heard. So the process of writing it down inked it more into my brain. And then I could refer back to it visually if needed. You know, how does this melody start? Oh, it starts with these two notes, and then the rest kind of comes.
So, I do not know whether you have children of your own, but do you pass on? Oh, so you know.
I don't have my own. My partner has two kids, but I
Okay.
don't have my own children. No, I have lots of nieces and nephews, and I teach. I've
Oh,
taught all of them except for one who's been too young until now. It's her turn coming up.
I see. Yeah. So yeah, you said your partner. So are you married or
We're not married.
okay? Yeah. I don't know if it's in the territory of is it too personal, but do you plan to have kids of your own?
No,
Okay.
I don't. My life is very full and complete with all the family and that I have around me, and with music. Yeah, such a gift.
So, tell me about the summers where music wasn't part of your daily routine. What was it like spending your childhood between like June and September?
uh, well, the version I which should tell my own students is I practiced through the summer. That is probably not what really happened. Usually trips. My mom's family's from England, so we would go to England, and not every year by all means, every few years. Go camping. I did a lot of extracurricular sort of camps. Not a lot. I did some camps from time to time, and I usually had a job when I was in my early teens. I had a job through the summer. But mountain biking, going off in the woods down to the beach. I was, an outdoor kid, so yeah.
Let's see.
I
Well,
wasn't the one that spent the whole summer in the practice room.
okay. If there's an off chance that one of your students watch this, then yeah, the secret's out.
The secret's out, but don't do what I did. Practice through the summer.
Mhm. So, tell me about the other instruments that you pl may play aside from the fiddle.
I play a very, very tiny bit of piano. So going to music school, piano is an imperative. Everybody takes, it's like kind of funny. It's a group piano class. So you
Mhm.
sit there with headphones and you learn piano in a group. And I took some private piano lessons before going to university, but very, very limited. And enough to, plonk out some chords along with a fiddle tune, or I could very slowly sight read some basic classical melodies. And a number of years ago, I bought myself an accordion and I learned some French musette on it, but I haven't played it in quite a few years. So really, the violin is it for me.
Yeah. So back to the academy. So what is the age group that your students belong to?
Most of our students currently are between, I would say, 6 and 15. My own students are all teens. The youngest I have is 11,
Mhm.
other than my nephew is 5. But I mostly teach teenagers, and we have, yeah, I would say we have that. Then there's a gap between 15 and 50. We have quite a lot of adult students, retired adult students, who play in fiddle groups or take private lessons, or we have a string quartet for adults, and we're starting a adult ukulele class that Danielle will be teaching in January. So yeah, it's a lot of kids to teens and then a gap until older adults.
Mhm.
And I have to say, the number of adults that come to us saying, I learned the violin as a kid and then I quit and I wish I didn't quit, um, far outweighs the ones that come to us as complete beginners. So
Oh,
kids don't quit.
mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So for the younger students, what is the I guess the gender proportion? Are there more girls than boys or vice versa?
Hmm. Interestingly, it seemed more, I would almost say it's 50-50.
Mhm.
Yeah, really.
Okay. And
Yeah.
that goes the same for the older ones?
Actually, yeah,
Mhm.
it does, interestingly.
Yeah.
For us, yeah. I
Well,
mean, we might have a few more girls that hang on longer, but no, I have quite a lot of teen boys. Yeah.
it's wonderful. Yeah. I grew up in Vietnam, and the instrument that people often learn is the piano. I think some may learn the violin, but
Mm.
mostly it's piano. And for the most part, those who uh, played usually and played well are girls. So so everybody just thought that pianos are for girls and
Oh,
music,
really?
musical instruments are for girls.
Oh, that's too bad.
Yeah, it is. It's a sad reality.
Yeah, I don't know. It's interesting. There's a lot of like when I was at Berkeley, even a lot of professional male violinists.
Oh, really?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. You look at any orchestra and yeah, I I mean, I guess boys maybe tend to get more into athletics, but I'm kind of stereotyping. So yeah, no, we have quite a few boys and young men who stick with it. Maybe we try to make it make it cool for everybody.
Let's see. Yeah. So my younger brother is like sitting right next to me, and he told me that that's not true. But yeah, I suppose he's brought up in a different environment than I am. I don't remember. Um, I don't remember boys ever getting interested in music, and let alone playing musical instruments. But
Interesting.
yeah, but I maintain a good interest in music because for the most part, it sort of helped me make sense of the world around me.
That's a great way of putting it. Yeah, it's a place that you can go on your own or with other people, and it can kind of become your own world. Like once you start owning an instrument, for me, it became a thing that eventually that my parents didn't know what I was supposed to be practicing. They didn't, I knew more than what they did, so it became my sort of little world, like you say, place I could go. I could play what I wanted. Once you get good enough, you can then explore more and be more expressive. And yeah, I think everybody needs that.
Yeah. Um, I had the great fortune of meeting like uh young musicians who are, I think pre-18, and I see them play their musical instruments. They're like incredibly phenomenal in that one. And yeah, I thought, that's remarkable. And yeah, there's a lot of obviously discipline and passion that goes into all that playing.
I would say, one thing that I I understand why people use the word talent, but I don't ascribe to it because to me it implies that either you have to have talent to be good at it, or that if you're good at it, you have talent. And I can say for myself that I had no natural talent. It was not easy. It was extremely difficult. And for most people, that is the case. And for most people, it takes a lot of work. And so when people, it's often adults will say, "Oh, I have no musical talent." I will nod and go, like that's, you just need to spend the time. Really, that's what it is that they haven't spent the time. And it takes time. You can't rush it. So anybody can play music. Yeah.
So how would you define the word talent?
I don't use it.
Mhm.
I suppose to me, talent implies that there's maybe a bit of a natural aptitude, which there are many people in the world that have a natural aptitude, and I see different rates of development between my students and my peers, but I really prefer to use skill because skill to me implies work has been put in. And not to say that talent implies that no work has been put in, but talent is often used to assume that somebody had it come easy to them. And I don't think that that is true for most musicians. It doesn't come easy for most of us.
That's it. Yeah. I remember when I was a kid, I used to get really envious of those who I would consider having talents, as in the talents that would draw them a huge audience. So the two areas in questions are sports and music.
Mhm.
So there are those who can sing really well, for example, and there are those who can kick a ball really far. Um, and yeah, I had neither of those, or I never really pay attention to cultivating either of those hobbies. But I think when I was like 15 or 16, I discovered that I have a good gift for languages and I can write well. So I think it's something that I rely on often. So
Mm,
I don't think writing well, the gift of gap or the gift of words, it's something that it's usually developed when you were younger. So it's not something
mm.
that I ever experienced when I was a kid. But yeah, now it's certainly served me well.
And I would agree that that's an aptitude or a talent. But also I'm sure you work hard at it too. You work at what you do in some way. Um, but yes, there definitely are people who have a gift for doing something well right off the bat. But then there's other sort of talents. I think talents that serve a musician are things like the ability to focus. Because if you can focus, um, and the ability to and tenacity. So those are sort of the talents that I think are of when I think of a musician. If you have a talent of focusing and have the talent of tenacity, then you will be able to be a good musician. Um, I mean, good is subjective too, but that's another philosophical debate. But I of course wish that I had talent. I think now I have developed skill, and one could argue that that's turned into talent. But um, yeah, I was not the one that picked up the violin and knew what to do with it at all.
Yeah.
And I would love to be those people that one of those people that you're referring to that, can sing, I mean, and draw a crowd and have that natural kind of magnitude, um, or magnetism, that's the word. Uh, but I also am grateful for having taken the time and being pushed to develop it because I feel like I earned it. Yeah.
For me at least, there are three things that I've sort of learned, when I've decided that, writing is going to be part of my life's work. Yeah, sort of, I'm not sure if fiction is something that I intend, but something non-fictional. Um, one thing that I find is that you see things in a way that's different from others, and you have to learn how to do without an audience mostly. And of course, you have to learn to get used to being rejected, yeah, both personally and professionally. Because once you see things differently than others, then there's a good chance that you may not find much in common with many.
Mhm. But the ones that you find you have something in common with is probably a much deeper connection.
I hope so. Yeah, I've tried, but yeah, so far not much has brought fruit.
Keep going. When you love something and you work hard at it, you'll get it.
Yeah, thank you. I certainly will.
Yeah. Oh, I look forward to reading what you've written. Are you able to share some of that? Like,
Um, I'm
yeah.
writing a research paper right now, and much of my writing is academic in nature. So, if you want to read that, then
Yeah.
certainly.
Yeah. Is it about what's it about?
I so for my current research paper, it's about the presidential election in America of 1896. So I'm majoring in American studies, and that is something that I produce out of it.
Wow. Interesting. Yeah, I'd be interested in reading that. And what brought you to do this podcast?
Um, it first started as a show where I talk about music. Then I thought it would be much more interesting if I invite like a given guest on the show so that the audience would have to listen to me babble on about music all the time. And that has pretty much maintained that way as a radio show when I was studying in Canada. But of course, my interests grow and grow, and over time, it covers a lot of fields that I happen to be interested in. But of course, music is still part of it. Um, During the lockdown, it had to become a podcast because I could not enter the studio to record,
Mhm.
and it has been that way since.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah,
Well, thanks for providing the platform.
yeah, and thank you for coming on, of course.
My pleasure.
Yeah, so finally, what does music mean to you?
Um, I really view music as um, a, a language that has no boundaries and no restrictions. Um, and I studied in Mexico as well. I did part of my undergraduate there, and I arrived there and I did not speak a word of Spanish. And my teachers arrived there from Russia, and they spoke a little bit of Spanish and no English. Um, and our classes were incredible, especially our ensemble classes, where our teacher, who did not speak any English or Spanish, was teaching a room of students who also didn't, I didn't speak the same language as them. And we were still able to communicate and create music. And it was almost more impactful because we didn't speak the same verbal language, because you can say so much with physical gesture, but also with sound. And music just, it moves your soul. And that's all I care really about doing when I'm playing for people. If I'm performing or even playing by myself, it's to get out of get people out of their heads and feel human and feel something, feel an emotion. As I hope when I play for people, if they feel sad, or if they feel excited or inspired, or even if it's just joy, or not just joy, if it's joy, um, those are feelings that really, for most of us, only come through music. Um, they can come through communications with other people or art, like visual art or beautiful scenery. But you think of a movie that, even if it looks beautiful, if it had no music in it, um, it's missing something. So I think the world is would be missing a lot if we didn't have music. Music, rhythm, sound. It's just it's part of being human.
That's a wonderful answer. And that's a wonderful note to end on. Thank you very much, Serena Eades, for joining the show.
My pleasure. Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah. And first, happy Christmas.
Same to you. Yeah. I hope you have a great holiday.